Hello again. Welcome to another session of our webinar series. We're delighted to have you here today with us at Questel. Today, we'll be having a discussion about trends and news from the latest editions of IACC and INTA annual meetings. For those of you that might not be familiar with these acronyms, they stand for the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition and the International Trademark Association, respectively. With you today will be my colleagues. One second, presentation. I'm going to have to do it a different way. Apologies for the technical difficulties. So with you today will be myself. My name is David Godoy. I'm a subject matter expert in the Trademark division at Questel. Joining me today is also Brian Looney. He's a senior key account manager also on the Trademark Services division, and with many years of experience, particularly in the topic that we'll be focusing on in this opportunity. The agenda that we have for you guys today, we'll start with an introduction to brand monitoring and brand enforcement, trying to highlight the relevance of this space, particularly in the current state of affairs and current state of technology. The role of IP counsels given this new landscape, some key takeaways from IACC and INTA, and we're going to dedicate also some words to try to investigate or try to strike a balance between new technologies and human expertise, and share with you some insights from the 2025 IP survey that was still carried out earlier this year, which also reveal quite interesting facts that we would like to also address with you today. Good, let's jump right in. IACC and INTA took place already a couple of weeks, or a few weeks ago, actually, in San Diego. For those of you who attended, I hope that by now you've been able to recover not only from the overwhelming amount of information that was being shared those days, but also from some of the parties. Why not? No judgment. I think we all been there. But jokes aside, I think we can all agree that these events do constitute a unique forum where thousands of professionals actually come together to meet old friends, make new friends, learn from the lectures, the roundtable discussions, and also by having really interesting conversations over a cup of coffee, a glass of wine with some of the other attendees. And at least in this opportunity, of course, we don't want to take any merit away from the many interesting topics that were being discussed during those days, but we want to focus in one of them as we were able to witness a lot of attention from the attendees at IACC and INTA, and that is brand monitoring and brand enforcement. It's not a new topic. It's been at the back of our minds for years now, and if you're, of course, in the IP world, this is probably part of your daily business. However, this has been now, the concerns about this topic have been exacerbated by the advent of AI. And I think, at least for us on this side of the aisle, as service providers, as IP counsels, we are now in the midst of what I call, for the lack of a more friendly analogy, a new arms race, right? Where we were able to see that throughout the course of these events, where everyone is trying to come up with the next best thing that is going to tackle these issues more efficiently. However, it's a highly complex topic because here we're talking not only about an area that is deeply intertwined with pretty much every single IP category, but not only that, also with different disciplines of law in areas of human knowledge, right? So we're talking about unfair competition, we're talking about data privacy, we're talking about consumer protection, internet law, and in the world we live in right now, with this high-paced evolution of technology and highly interconnected global trade, it is demanding a closer cooperation between different stakeholders, uh, private investigators, law enforcement, customs officials, internet providers, platform owners, and IP councils, which we do believe continue to play a paramount role in the proper safeguard and oversight of the system. Um, it does challenge a paradigm, which is what is the role that the IP Council should play in this new landscape. When we share some of the insights or some of the results from the IP survey, we'll be able to elaborate on that, because we were able to assess the sentiment towards this transformative wave that AI has brought into our table. And it begs the question, and it's making us reimagine the role that we are playing, at least for those of us that visited the law faculties 20 years ago or more than that, when we were being trained under these traditional frameworks of trying to match a particular behavior with the conduct that is being described by the law. Given this highly complex network of human interactions that are now constituting global trade, that is not an easy task anymore. It's really hard to pinpoint who is the infringer, where's that infringement taking place, what is the role that platforms are playing into contributing or facilitating these types of infringement. So that means that we have to start thinking outside the box and develop new skills if we want to properly advise our clients. I think we can all agree that, of course, we welcome technological advancement. We're embracing AI. We're trying to identify how we can further the development of AI and better cater the needs to our clients. But it's an irrefutable fact as well that alongside uh, those of us, which I call the good guys, that trying to see how we can use it for the benefit of our clients, there is a already massive and growing industry of bad faith actors out there that are also trying to see how they can find loopholes and try to use those technologies to take unfair advantage of brand owners and ride on the cocktails of someone else's goodwill and their brands. We do believe that when it comes to trademarks, this does gain a special connotation or a particular relevance, because a generally accepted definition, of course, of trademarks, probably since the inception of the trademark system itself and the enactment of the Paris Convention, is that trademarks are commercial tools that are conveying different messages to consumers. The most obvious to all of us, perhaps, is that they are an indicator of the source, the commercial source of goods and services. But that definition seems to fall short of the current challenges and threats that brand owners are facing with online infringers. And this, I believe, has been acknowledged and developed in their doctrine by the Court of Justice of the European Union, for example, because when you revisit some of the cases, some of their resolutions when deciding on trademark infringement cases, they have advanced this doctrine about the trademark functions, and they talk not only about the origin function, which is the one we just mentioned a few seconds ago, but they also talk about these other functions of the trademarks, or these other messages that trademarks are sending to consumers. And those are functions of quality, investment, communication, and later on also advertisement. And For me, there's no other area or a clear example of the potential damage to these functions that when it comes to online infringement due to its global scale. As I was trying to prepare for this webinar and putting the slide text together, I was trying to come up, with probably a novel case, something related to big tech and AI, and but I just stumbled upon this case by binge watching Netflix on a Sunday afternoon. I don't know how many of you in the audience are like me and as true crime junkies. And it's what I'm citing here on the slide as the Tylenol case. It's not exclusively linked to IP, and it had to do with the tampering of Tylenol bottles back in the 80s in the United States. But what was really striking for me from that documentary, besides, of course, how morbid the behavior of that person poisoning people with cyanide was, is that you could see that a lot of commentators had concerns about the actual subsistence of Johnson and Johnson as a company, because back then only the sale of Tylenol represented 25% of the profits for the company. So you could see the position of the CEO and the board of directors back then of trying to change the narrative again, because the company had lost perhaps the most intangible asset that they had, which is the trust of their consumers. Consumers were hesitant to buy Tylenol because they didn't know if they were actually getting the real thing, or facing or risking being poisoned by these pills. So you could see that once the reputation of a company has been heavily damaged, it's really hard to bounce back. And this is one of the threats that we are seeing companies facing, of course, when it comes to the industry where you're at. You might be facing a myriad of different types of infringement out there. And we all understand that once a company has reached this privileged position where they have been able to position themselves in the mind of consumer as a preferred choice of goods and services, in the world we live in, that it's pretty much bombarded by an asymmetry of information, consumers are reluctant to change. We all been in that situation where friends and family are recommending to us new products, new services, and we just like what we like, and it's really hard to change our consumption patterns. So that's where companies want to achieve. They want to build a strong consumer loyalty base, and that is at risk when we're talking about online infringement and their risks. And just as I used some references to the jurisprudence of the Court of Justice and the European Union, I also want to make some references to at least the terminology that common law and trademark law in the United States uses, particularly when we see the amendment to the Lanham Act through the Anti-Dilution Revision Act of 2006, which I think is quite illustrative or very self-explanatory of the type of challenges and threats that they are trying to tackle, right? So by this, what I'm trying to say is that depending on the area and the industry, the business that you are conducting, you might want to consider focusing all your energy and your resources into tackling what should be the priority or what correlates to your company goals. What I mean by that is that, for instance, if you're a public figure, you might be more interested in preventing the misuse of your image in unethical activities or illicit activities. We see that through the use of deepfakes, for example. However, if you are in the retail or the fashion industry, you want to prevent the spread of counterfeits, because that can reduce or really hinder the distinctiveness of your brand. But as we were citing now the Tylenol case, you might not be too concerned on someone far away just producing T-shirts with the Tylenol bottle as their design. But maybe what you want to do is try to prevent a public health crisis, right? I was just having a conversation with a client of mine a couple of weeks ago, and they manufacture batteries for electronic devices. And they were facing a real challenge because people were producing fake products, and these products were exploding, and people's houses were being reported as catching fire due to this issue. So it is important to understand what makes the most sense for you in this landscape. And in a few minutes, Brian is going to elaborate on that and help us navigate through these challenges. And just one more example, when we're talking about some of our clients, for instance, are in the banking or insurance industry. For them, it might be more of a concern to prevent any kind of fraudulent activity. A quick anecdote before I wrap up my introduction. I just moved to the US, for example, after living almost 15 years in Europe. And of course, one of the first things you do is to try to acquire a local phone number. And it's incredible that not a day goes by. And those of you living in the US maybe can relate to that. Without receiving fake calls and messages that are clear phishing attempts. And that gives you already an idea of the magnitude of this issue and how easy it is to go down the rabbit hole. And without proper advice, without having a reliable partner alongside that can work with you through these challenges, it can easily become a never ending game of the mouse and the cat. So after this introduction, let me open the mic for my colleague Brian. Brian, does any of this resonate with what you heard during IACC and INTA? Can you share with us maybe your impressions from what people are talking about, what people are concerned about in this with this topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly it resonates. It's very much on point with just the general topics of what's out there. I think the key part of it that is most in line with it is, despite all of the advancements and all of the effort and anything that's going on, there's just kind of a general puzzle. I want to say befuddlement, but just the general puzzle of, why does this continue to get bigger? Why is it becoming harder and harder to deal with, and at the same time becoming such a larger problem as it just continues to grow? Um, and so that's been I think, kind of an underlying theme of a lot of the conversations that I had. Not specifically what's going on in the content of IACC specifically, um, but in the conversations that I had with lots of different people, whether they were vendors in the space, and by vendors I mean everybody from investigative firms to actual brand protection, um, companies, and kind of other ancillary things that people do, which might be investigation support or um, customs tracking and a lot of other things for it. So that kind of overall curiousness that everybody has as to why it's happening. What I mostly took away from IACC was a shift in the emphasis of where companies are trying to now push a little bit more, and this was greatly reflected in the content at IACC, around essentially going back to basics in a lot of ways and putting more emphasis on investigations, in particular OSINT investigations or open source techniques, and working with firms along that and working with customs and really getting into the things coming into the different countries around the world or within the free trade zones, et cetera. And so there was a bigger emphasis on bridging the online to offline in a lot of the conversations from that. I think one of the other key takeaways for it, and these were more of the private conversations that I had with a lot of brands in particular, was frustration with a lot of the online brand protection vendors in the space. And this was universal across everyone, for it, of just a kind of continued anticipation and expectation that these companies are going to develop more of a technological solution to battling this, as they've kept promising this over and over and over again. Oh, we're going to have this thing. AI is going to change the game for us, and the rest. And certainly I think brands ultimately want that to happen faster than it's able to be developed at this point. And I think that's a key part of that mix from the vendor perspective. I think a lot of them are still trying to pitch this in a lot of ways of a technological solution, and they've gotten away from the service side. And so that was another frustration that a lot of brands, reflected in it, is the promise of technology, has been everything that they've been hearing, and despite the frustrations. And so they feel like that's taken away the focus of delivering, an actual salve or medicine to the problem, if you will. And that's one of the key things that I have seen back around it as far as the feedback, that was happening. It's kind of this: when is it going to come? Why hasn't it come now? And they're getting, stretched and pressed to essentially push the vendors to try and do more with less. Personally, I've been in that industry. Sorry, David, but just personally, having been in that industry for almost 20 years now, and focusing a lot of effort on brand protection, it's one of the things that I think everyone needs to understand is the difficulty that it takes to deal with the detection of these issues. And I'm not referring to the identification of what's real and what's fake, but just the ecosystem that everyone is living in order to get at the information and ingest it to then be able to analyze it in a way. Because platforms don't want to be split. They don't want to freely give up the data that they have on all of the products in their websites effectively. So several of them have created online portals which you have to go to in order to do enforcement. Alibaba's probably the most famous, or equally famous, is the Amazon brand registry components. But there's thousands of global marketplaces. The same things exist on social media as more and more commerce is happening in that particular realm. And then, as happens, the cyclical nature of these things, websites have come back to be another problem, in particular scam websites, often that are enabled by shopping solutions like Shopify and others that are similar to that. But the difficulty at getting at that data, because these platforms rightly are concerned about cybersecurity attacks to their platform. They have things that prevent the scraping of this, and none of them give API access to any vendors in order to get at the data any better. And so when you're using a technological solution to try and do that, or trumpeting that you have this technological solution to get at that, it gives a false impression to brands and corporate customers, or even the law firms that support them and work in it, that this is easier than it really ultimately is, because of CAPTCHAs, because of all of these things that they put up to prevent that type of activity. So it just makes it difficult to just first get at the data before then being able to analyze it and use other tools for that. And so that's my kind of counterpoint to the frustration that the brands have of wanting more to be done. But often that particular subject, in my opinion, and I've been to, I think, 15 IACCs in my lifetime now. That's one of the things that almost never gets discussed is the difficult part of getting at the data. And I don't think even a lot of vendors want to do that. Now that leads back to how we try and do it here at Questel is a much greater balance between the human inspection of what is found and the ability to get at the data in a way that a human would in a combination of technology and actual service across it. And that's not to say that we're any better or anything else for it, but certainly I think the brand expectation of just take care of my problem, be my partner in this, and help me attack it in a way that helps me actually generate revenue, where I'm eliminating the competition that I have that is what a counterfeit is. It's actual competition. It'd be like trying, if you're Coke, you want to win market share from Pepsi. Well, in this case, you're actually trying to win it back from Coke, but just not real Coke for that. Although, obviously, a beverage is a different analogy when it comes to this particular problem. But that's the overall takeaway was this expectation and anticipation of when is this all going to come and when is it going to get better and different.
No, I think you have nailed it. I cannot agree with you more. It's also what I witnessed during the events. A lot of the focus being placed on the tools that we're developing, and not so much on placing the attention on your client's needs. And you could get an idea on the frustration from brand owners, given, of course, that as we were saying, that the magnitude of this issue. But I think there is hope still, and then you were already going in that direction. So I wanted to ask you your short-term perspectives, or in a way for you to explain to us what is the value of having a reliable partner that can take you by the hand and help you navigate through these challenges in an efficient way?
The value of that is immense, but it really comes down to brands and or their representatives. They have to think of this more as something that they need to take an active role in setting expectations, but also listening back to the vendor to make sure that the expectations are realistic and that they can be accomplished. An interesting kind of example of this is that a lot of times, let's say you're a lubricant company. So you make motor oil and something like that. Well, there's massive amounts of fake versions of that because you can mimic the viscosity of something like that. You can make it smell that way. You can even use actual oil, but you're slapping on a brand that perhaps people want to use for that. Now, that brand can also become trendy when it comes to apparel and other licensed goods, if you will, but they may not even have a licensed goods program for that. But the point being is that consumers, right, look at that and go, well, I want a shirt that has that logo on it, or I want a phone case that has that logo, on it because it's kitschy, it's trendy for them, and I don't know, or ironic, however they want to look at it. But you can see a lot of that type of product available for sale online. And that ultimately becomes low-hanging fruit to try and tackle from an enforcement perspective. But in the end, is that going to make that lubricant company money? Okay, it's not ultimately. I mean, it could if they do have a robust licensing program and they're receiving royalties for that. And it may be something that they want to, get rid of as part of it. But if the focus actually is on the products that they make and trying to deal with that issue and understanding how difficult that may be to determine what's real and what's fake when it comes to that, but also understanding the inherent risk of that product being out there. If you're talking about, an engine that's going to seize, or brakes that are going to break down, no pun intended, because of the inferior use of these products within that particular use case that it has. Whereas a lot of times the vendors are focused on, well, I need to hit a goal, I need to hit some accomplishment of activity. And so they focus on the low hanging fruit versus dealing with the challenge of actually, looking at the problem, right? If I'm a luxury watchmaker, as an example, am I generating revenue back by going after the $50 watches that you might be able to find versus the $50,000 watch that it costs for it? I'm not necessarily losing a customer. Yes, it's a knockoff. Yes, it's a problem. Yes, I want to eliminate that. But if too much of the focus is on that, I'm ultimately not necessarily achieving what I want to do as far as bringing revenue back to my business for it, because the person who's buying the $50 watch wasn't going to pay $50,000 most likely. For it. Again, you can apply this concept to any type of product, in the market. What you need is a partner who's going to help you see the forest from the trees, right? Eliminate as much of the noise and the focus on that. Not that you don't want to do it, okay? And it may be the direction of the company to try and, tackle that type of problem and eliminate it as well. But if a partner is going to work with you and perhaps question you on that strategy, that's really what you ultimately want to have. The last part of it, though, is if you have a vendor or a partner that is talking about them, then that's a problem. And what I mean by that is that if they're talking up their technology and everything first, then they're not talking about your problem. Okay, so you want a vendor who's going to talk to you and help you understand what's going on. It's a big internet that's living and breathing and growing all the time, sometimes, shifting and moving. You want somebody that's going to help you understand the scope and scale and size of your problem. Hopefully that helps to communicate that they have the ability to deal with that, but the focus should be on the customer's problem, not on, hey, I've got this great AI that's doing this, I've got the ability to analyze images in this way. Yes, that's important, but that shouldn't be the thrust of their discussion, in my opinion. And I've been doing this a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I think that's the perfect introduction to the next slides that I wanted to briefly touch upon. And it's, yeah, this message about this overwhelming sensation of the omnipresence of AI, right? And it sounds sexy, right? At Questel, we are, of course, embracing AI. We got an early ticket to this ride, let's say, and we believe in it. But we believe that it's also important to be cautious about it, to be smart about how to use it. And we don't think it's going to replace the importance of IP practitioners, IP counsels that will continue to add value to whatever results AI is producing. And this was supported also by the results that we got from the IP survey. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a few seconds. But just to give you a quick sense of the portfolio that we offer to our clients at Questel, we have both what we call the do-it-yourself type of solutions, which are AI, algorithm-powered softwares. But we also have, and we take pride on that, and that's where we think we stand out from competitors out there. A robust team of professionals, IP practitioners with many years of experience in their fields that will help you also translate the results from these tools into measurable and strategic results and that are consistent with your company goals, and that ultimately will be able to show a better return on your investment. And as I was saying earlier this year, the company carried out an exercise where we consulted more than 500 MP professionals around the globe around a series of topics, particularly about AI, of course, and how they perceive AI transforming the everyday activities. It's not limited to trademarks themselves, so we encourage you to have a look at it in depth, and you'll find some interesting insights. Besides stating the obvious, which is, of course, that is a generally accepted notion or embraced of AI, there's also not an insignificant degree that I wouldn't call it perhaps rejection, but maybe some still concern or reluctancy to adopt AI. And I think it's important to hear those voices as well, and raise questions, particularly when you're considering a vendor that is coming at you with, the panacea to all of your problems, because most likely it's not the case. And you can see, for example, here some of the areas where IP councils have highlighted the future developments of AI, or where they would like to see better use cases of AI into these topics. You can see at the bottom left of your screen that one of those is online brand protection. At Questel, we have also taken this information in order to draw a blueprint of what the next developments are going to be. We have already jump-started many projects on that field that we'll be eager and excited to share with you if you're interested. However, we want to double down on that. We want to emphasize what we were insisting from the beginning, and that Brian helped us understand better, which is it's important to develop technology further, but it's most important from our perspective to have a clear understanding of how that technology and a team of experts behind it can help you in your company's goals. So at Questel, we believe on working alongside our clients or building a strategy that works best for you, and not just meeting a quota or just, as Brian was saying, focusing on the low-hanging fruit, right? Because that's the easiest thing to do. And if your technology is just aiming at tackling that in a more automated way, which of course it does help, some of our clients might still be interested in pursuing that kind of approach. Because they have zero tolerance to online infringement, and that is okay. But it's important that that decision is made as informed as possible, and that's why we believe, and we want to reiterate this fact, that it's important that IP counsels, experts, and team of professionals that understand these issues, that have the are willing to get their hands dirty for you and help you understand what works best for you, can assist you on this in this space. So,
David, I want to just chime in one.
yeah, sure, go ahead.
Little thing. Another underlying theme of a lot of conversations around AI, of gee, what's going to happen? What's going to is this, how is it working? What's going to be there to help us. Everyone's very curious about it, and everyone wants a little bit, of some understanding of it and how it's going to help them. And a lot of people are taking a far more active role than others, through it. But one through line that I had in almost every conversation across both events was, I don't want my work training your AI, for it. And again, that's a concern about the work that anyone has and that they're doing. What I will assure you when it comes to our development of this, we are not learning from you, um, in this effort. And I would say that's mostly the same with a lot of the other vendors too, um, and what they're trying to do for it. So you're not teaching our system. We're learning from all of the publicly available information, the case data that exists around this across every jurisdiction in the world, is fed into how we try and understand it and deal with it. And that's why the types of tools that we're creating are meant to be supportive to you, not a replacement, of you, um, and ultimately make your life easier for it. So you're
Yes.
not training your system. Is the key takeaway from them.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. So that brings us close to the end. I know we only have 2 minutes left. I see some questions in the chat. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll have time to respond to all of those. We'll make sure we go through them, and we'll send you, of course, not only a copy of these slides for your records. We'll be answering in a detailed way also all of your questions. And most importantly, if you're interested in seeing the solutions that we have briefly touched upon and how we at Questel believe can help you, can help your company, can help your brands implement an intelligent strategy to tackle these issues that can be quite overwhelming. We'll be happy to set up a meeting with you. We thank you so much for your attention, allowing us to have this conversation with you, and I hope that you were able to profit from it. It was certainly a pleasure for us to share some insights with you. And with that being said, thank you, Brian. Appreciate also your support. And we wish everyone a good rest of the day and see you soon.
Take care, everyone. Bye.